to curate the exhibition Maikapoli Representations of Moana Nui Akea. And it's a collaboration also with the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, who provided many of the artists access to the collection, the Pacific Island Photography Collection. And many of the works are responding to the historic treasures that are in that collection. So before we dive completely in, I also wanted to acknowledge the ancestral Kanaka Oiwi of this Aina, where the donkey mill is situated on the beautiful slopes of Hualalai, in the moku of Kona Akau, in the Ahupua'a of Keauhou. So I know because we are located in different places on this earth. I'll start with Elle. Where are you joining us from?
Miyuyam. I'm in the lands of the Pamoan people and the Miwok people, and I'll throw in the Unatsatsis people because they never hear their name shouted out. In Northern California, about an hour north of San Francisco, close to the ocean, but not rich enough to afford to park there.
Hello. Right on. Carolyn.
Aloha, everyone. I'm Carolyn Kuali, and I reside right now in Berkeley, California, but from Hawaii, born on Oahu, but I call Maui my home, even though I'm living in Berkeley, and I'm living in the land of the Ohlone people. For those of you that don't know where Berkeley is, it's right across the bay from San Francisco.
Aloha mai kako. My name is Ian Joseph Kekoa Hardwick Kuali'i, or Ian Kuali'i. I am the son of Carolyn Kuali'i and nephew of L. Frank. I currently reside in Ogapoge, which is Whiteshell Water Place in the Tewa language, also known as Santa Fe, New Mexico. This is the ancestral homeland of the Tewa people and the Apache, mostly, and a little bit further south, the Dene or Navajo people, and Tiwa. So thank you for joining us.
Mahalo. And to all of our beautiful guests, if you'd like to introduce yourself in the chat and where you're joining us from, that'd be fabulous as well. So we can see where everyone is at. Oh, mahalo, mahalo. Like I said, two of the artists here are featured in our current exhibition here at the mill. And just to give a little bit of background on the exhibition itself, it explores identity and representation of Kanaka Oiwi and people of the Pacific through contemporary artworks, activating stories of people, places, and cultures which have been historically and contemporaneously misrepresented and erased. And it's by recentering these voices and perspectives, artists reclaim the narrative and continue to build on that strong foundation that was built by our ancestors. So just an incredible way for us, like I said, to reclaim that narrative and show, many of the artists responding to historic representations of Indigenous people. And one of the things we also want to encourage to the exhibit is for viewers to consider alternative perspectives and ways of understanding and connecting with the past. How do we see the past? How is it represented? And to consider the empowering and healing possibilities of affirming one's own identity. So, this who we brought together today has just continues to do such important work in that sphere, whether as with Ian as an artist, as Carolyn as an incredible curator, consultant, and activator, and all of the incredible things that Dr. L. Frank has been involved in and dedicated her life to, really. And I know Miho had put the bios inside of the chat, but I would like to share some of the bios just to give people context of how illustrious our panel members are, because it's really quite impressive. If you happen to Google any of them, so much information comes up, and I encourage each of you attending to look into their work and follow them on wherever you follow people, social media, and all of that. So I'm gonna start with L. Frank. Okay, wait. Cool. Here we go. L. Frank is the nom d'art of L. Frank Manriquez, a Tongva, Ajachemem and Rarámuri artist. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Okay, I tried. Writer, tribal scholar, activist who has dedicated her life to the revitalization and visibility of Indigenous art practices and languages originating from the Los Angeles basin. She brings an extensive knowledge of California Indian cultural affairs and has exhibited her artwork, which includes painting, sculptures, weaving, photography, cartoons, and regalia in museums and galleries around the world. She works to revitalize indigenous languages and culture through numerous projects, and she was the first in her nation to build and navigate their traditional canoe in over 100 years, and participates in the annual canoe journey, which gathers thousands of canoe families together. Just last month, Elle was the recipient of an honorary degree from the University of San Francisco. Whee! So that's just the groundwork. We're gonna dig deep into that, and some of your other awesome stories. Oh, okay. Carolyn Kuali is a descendant of the Native Hawaiian and Apache ancestry, and the co-founder and director of Kuaina Associates Incorporated, an Indigenous art and cultural organization. For the past 30 years, Carolyn has worked as a capacity building specialist, providing consultation to Native Hawaiian, American Indian, Alaska Native, and Pacific Island communities in culture preservation programs, cultural exchange, special projects, and fellowship programs for Indigenous artists. She's worked on numerous exhibitions, such as the Royal Hawaiian Featherworks, Nahulu Ali'i, at the De Young Fine Arts Museum, the Pacific Worlds exhibit at the Oakland Museum of California, which itself won numerous awards from organizations such as the American Alliance of Museums and Western History Association. She was a curator of Continuous Thread, celebrating our interwoven histories, identities, and contributions, which was a photographic exhibit celebrating contributions of San Francisco Bay Area's Native community. And she also co-produced the Ancestral Ink Symposium, which was a convening of Indigenous tattoo and cultural practitioners at the Santa Fe Art Institute. And she is currently the guest curator at the Heard Museum for the exhibit He'enalu, the Art and Legacy of Hawaiian Surfing, which you can see is on her background. Yeah. And last but not least, Ian Kuali. He is a multidisciplinary self-taught artist of Hawaiian and Apache ancestry, working in the forms of large-scale hand-cut paper, or in our exhibition, hand-cut kapa, murals, prints, and site-specific installations. From a single sheet of paper using only an X-Acto blade as his tool, his detailed hand-cut paper portraits, as you can see behind me, journal entries and scenes are masterfully rendered with a blend of loose urban contemporary techniques. Meditative at its core, Ian's hand-cut method explores ideas of indigeneity, modern progress, biodiversity, and the foundation of one's own history. You know, Kuali's art practice has evolved into a reflection of his personal journey, a dichotomy between urban grit and ancestral spirit. I love that. Chaotic energy and refined control, ultimately unifying the delicate and rough in a symbiotic representation. So mahalo again to all of you for joining us. I can't wait to dive in here. And again, this conversation is amongst families. So, you know, I'm going to be posing some questions to specific panelists, and then feel free, as we do, to jump in, comment, even disagree with each other.
Yeah,
if you
Emina,
feel,
honestly too, please like rein us in if we get like too wild.
I kind of like to let you guys loose, because you're so interesting and opinionated, as we discussed earlier. No, just kidding. And then
I'd like to correct something right off the bat,
Oh,
just in case interested parties are watching.
yeah.
I helped make the first canoe
Okay.
in
Yes.
260 years. Yeah,
Okay.
because
Oh,
we don't want anyone
200.
angry with me. Yeah.
No, it's all.
No one would notice the difference, but I don't want to create more. So, okay. Yeah. Thanks.
No, mahalo for that clarification. I tried to get my info right, but you know how that is. No, and then that goes with like our idea of building our own canoe, and that part of the title of today's event is in reference to what Elle shared with a group of youth to build their own canoe, and using that foundation of knowledge that has been passed on to take that next step forward and go for it and not hold back. You know, one of my more recent and favorite, sayings in Hawaiian even is "Mai pa'a I kaleo," let your voice be heard. And I think in this time, what makes this conversation relevant is that as Indigenous people, we do have to, or we have that kuleana, that privilege and responsibility to do what's right for us, for our ohana. And although it may be uncomfortable at times, we know what is right. We know what is guiding us. And yeah, as challenging as that may be, we have no choice in certain ways. Yeah. So I would like to start with Elle for it's a big question, but we'll get into some of the, we'll just see how it goes. Basically Elle, and then Carolyn and Ian, you can add, you can respond to the question as well. Basic question: how and why did you begin your work as an artist, activist, educator, and agitator?
Well, some of those create the other things when you do. I began this work. I had never put it into words until just the other day, and I began this work because when I was traveling around the world for about 10 or 12 years before I was born, choosing where to live with this other Dene Indian from Canada, I could hear things. I could hear different languages. And when I was in utero, excuse me, I could hear different languages. But when I popped out, all the languages were English and Spanish and German and some more German and some more Spanish. And there wasn't, not where I was as a baby, was there the language that I was expecting, nor was there the life that I was expecting. And so I had to go seek that out, which I did. And I found 600 of my people. They were all dead and under the ground, but they were still 600 of my people. And they would communicate with me. And so that took me down that road, which is a much longer thing. The activist part came when it's a long story, so I'll try and abbreviate, but because I can make it really, really much longer than it needs to be. Walking with my grandfather, I was about 3.5, and he was my God, my hero. He was everything to me. And we're walking along, and suddenly we stop. He stopped to communicate with somebody. But when he stopped to communicate, I could feel it through his hand. So I looked at him. He suddenly looked at me real differently. It looked very different to me. He looked like when somebody is sick. So I thought he was sick. And my grandfather, he squeezed my hand, the universal, just wait, squeeze of the hand. And when he had finished talking and the other person had left, he came down to my he knelt down to look at me, and he put both his hands on my shoulders, and he said, Mejita, because he only spoke Spanish. He said, this is how the gringos want us to be. He had acted, instead of proud and strong, he had acted shuffling and sick. And I looked at him and I thought, hell no. So I was just a baby. So all I could get out was no, and it was adamant. I remember the look on his face. It was surprise and then a smile, and that was it. I was determined not to let anybody else's father, mother, grandfather, brother, sister be disrespected just because they were not white, basically. So that led me on the road. There's plenty of catalysts out there in the world to turn somebody into an activist. There's like injustice laying all around like trash, we hardly notice it, and we just need to pick it up and put it where it belongs. Was there more? I forgot the rest of your question. I'm sorry.
No, that was beautiful. You went way further back than I expected.
Yeah, I know.
Oh.
That's like 70, 80 years ago, and I was only born 70 years ago. Yeah.
Well, I do also just wanted to share, connecting with you, Elle, from our friend Jane Chang Mi, who introduced me to your incredible work. And, I just was really set on including you in the exhibition. And the song that you shared, we had talked about care of this Pacific Island photography collection that LACMA has cared for and rehoused and digitized. But from our knowledge, no Native people had formally accepted or, received the collection on the land that it's on. So as a way for us to welcome the collection, a version of it here in Kona, and then to also plant that seed to the museum folks that, hey, this is important, that the museum is, that the treasures of this collection, although they're photographs and maybe not considered traditional artifacts or arts, but they still hold mana and they still need to be cared for energetically. So could you share, before we get into Carolyn and Ian's backstory, could you share a little bit about your piece as well, the song that you sang for the exhibition?
I would if I could remember which one it was.
Oh, you want me to play it? I can play it.
Go ahead.
Okay.
But the reason that I did, and I chose to sing, and I was happy to be involved, was in order for me to have a tribe or be a part of a tribe, when I was old enough to look around, there are remnants, there are pieces that we're not gone, but there are pieces of us around. So I wanted more than that language and all the culture that comes with being a human being in a certain place. And so I found that I had to start seeking out museums. And it wasn't just museums here. It's museums, like I've been to Europe several times, which sounds like a vacation, but I've been chased through the streets by neo-Nazis, and slept in a house because it was free, where people had escaped an insane asylum, and I don't speak French, and I made the French mad at me one time. So, but all of that I've done an awful lot that was scary and weird, along with beautiful and exciting. So knowing that there were photographs, I understand there weren't, a sacred, rock or something that I really fall in love with, that they're photographs, but I still understand what our things mean to us and what our things mean to us when they're in the hands of others or we don't have access. So it was very important for me to, and no, they never, I don't know that any of us knew they were there. Any indigenous from there knew that they existed, because it's not protocols. It has not been protocol to say, hey, something of culture is coming, into your culture, into your place. the energies mixing. How do you, it's canoe protocols. You welcome and you invite and you allow, and you ask permission to be. So I'm glad that's changing. Did you find the song yet?
I did. Okay, here we go.
Netwanyane Ellen Frank. None kukamovet pi Ajachemem pi Rarámuri. Tupa engmawish mila yachlo nga supulano ngaloma nga tupash engmawish mila yachlo nga I sing that song for the journey of what's here in my homelands headed to your homelands, the memories that what's coming are going to stir up in the peoples. Every little piece that we can put back together about our peoples, who we are, who we were before, it drives us to who we are going to be in the future. So I'm incredibly happy that memories, that images, that remembering parts are coming home. Aloha.
Mahalo, mahalo, mahalo. And to hear your voice too in this space, as people are coming in, is just a beautiful sound to fill the space too. So mahalo nui for being a part of this, getting your blessing in a way, and to think about that care and make sure that museums know that that's part of conservation. It's part of archival, care, is that energetic and spiritual care as well. So,
and that song is about it's coyote, but it's someone who is so alone and their sorrow is overwhelming, and the bird, the sky full of birds, the ravens, they see this, and so they cry in unison so that the person doesn't cry alone. Coyote.
Carolyn, would you like to share how you got into your role? I mean, I think as curator and consultant, when I heard about the He'enalu exhibition, and then, learned more about your work, in a way you need to navigate with a lot of different institutions. And we got to talk a little bit about that in our last conversation. But if you'd like to share a little bit of how you got into the work that you're doing, how and why, it would be awesome.
Well, first of all, I want to give a shout out to you, Mina, because the fact that you had the insight to invite Elle to open up your exhibit that you curated, and the reason behind why you invited Elle to do that, I think, is incredibly thoughtful on your part in a very meaningful way. You didn't just make it, you're on the Big Island, and it's Big Island's, focused, as much as you realize the importance of those photographs and the place that they're housed. I mean, each artist, I think, took the story and did their interpretation, but you as a curator saw the importance of what this whole thing was really about, and where these photographs are housed, and how you gave honor to that. And, so I want to commend you on that. And I think, more and more as we tell the stories of our peoples, that, those kinds of intentions need to happen. And, it's not just about putting three-dimensional or two-dimensional or three-dimensional or installation art in a space, but it's about creating life and something that is spiritually alive and living and is going to touch people in many different ways. People are going to see things and feel things differently. But I think as a job as a curator, it's the forethought that has to, you have to be very intentional on so many levels. And I think one of them is a spiritual level. And, of course, the aesthetics and all that other stuff. And I mean, down to just even the practicalities of things, of making things fit, and paying attention to, like different fire codes and things like that too, but, I don't think people really understand, what curation is, what it really deals with. It's like operating like a big rig or something, and you have to make it's got many moving parts, and you're dealing with all kinds of different personalities, from artists that are very particular to artists that are very easy to work with to, to staff that have their ways of doing things. And I've been in situations where I've worked in spaces where staff, they're very, they have real ownership of their space, and they don't like say a visiting curator to come in and do things. And, so there's all kinds of things, that someone like me, who's not just a visiting curator, but also a curator that happens to be Indigenous. And usually if I'm asked to do something, it's because it's coming from an Indigenous lens, and I'm handling Indigenous storytelling. So that for me brings a lot of heavy responsibility. Honestly, if I was a non-native curator, I probably wouldn't have to be so particular about my kuleana, but because I am an Indigenous person, it puts extra responsibility on my shoulders, because I'm not just representing my work, but I'm representing a culture. I'm representing the stories that came before, and the stories that are being told now, and the stories that are going to be told in the future. So I think so how did I get started? I didn't pick to do this, to be quite honest with you. It picked me. And I mean, I've always had a interest, a creative interest was always something that I always had. It was just part of who I was or am as a person. I mean, I think even as, before I got involved in real community work, I was a mother. I have 6 children. Ian is one of my middle kids. I have 3 boys, 3 girls. And, and I think one thing that I really enjoyed being a mother is the creativity of being a mother. And, and the majority of my kids are artists, they're musicians, they're pretty opinionated and talented individuals. And I think, that was part of me being a mother, because my kids went to music school when they were like in preschool. They went, they were exposed to a lot of art and history. And they grew up on a university, because I was a student, and they, so they had all that exposure, and I had all that exposure too. And so I think that's one of the things that brought me to what I'm doing now. But also I have to say that I was very fortunate, because, and this didn't happen necessarily to me when I was young. This happened to me when I was pretty much into my adult life, and where I began to work with some cultural masters You know, and that took me in. You know, I didn't go seeking them out. It just worked out that way, that they saw something in me and they wanted me to be part of what they were doing. And, you know, some of those people was Catherine Sobel, who was the first American Indian woman to be inducted into the National Women Hall of Fame, along with Wilma Mankiller, who was the chief of the Cherokee Nation. Her and Wilma were the first women of that, I forget what year it was. Catherine was the founder of the Malki Museum, the first American Indian museum. She was a Native scholar before people even thought about Indigenous scholars. She wrote some of the first dictionary for the Kuya people. She wrote books on herbal healing of her native plants. And she became my California mother. You know, she became a person that she took me under her wing. And, you know, and then there was, and if I talk about Hawaii, Sam Ka'ai, I would, you know, I'm very close to Sam Ka'ai. He's like family to me. I had the privilege of working with Sam for work with him very closely for a good 10 years.
Yeah.
And, you know, basically took care of all of his business. One of the stories, you know, that I had the privilege of is when Pua Van Dorp took Father Damien's hand to Belgium to become a saint. Well, she made the kappa for the, you know, for the arm, and Sam made the bamboo container, and I was the person that took the bamboo container to Aloha Cargo. So, you know, so I had the opportunity to be with some amazing people. And, you know, and it wasn't so much sitting there and asking them a bunch of questions, but it was sitting at their feet and just taking it in. And I think that's where I got my start, you know. And, you know, when you work with people like a Catherine Sobel or a Sam Ka'ai, those are people that have been revitalizing culture for generations. I mean, you know, like way before me and Elle's time. And, you know, they were like the forerunners, you know, of this. And, you know, so I was exposed to, you know, to how they worked in museums or how they interacted with government when it came to, you know, advocating for their people, for their language. I mean, Catherine Sobel was doing language way before, you know. And then in the 1980s, I got a little bit more political, and I went to an Indigenous conference, People's Conference in San Rafael, California. And at that conference was Mililani Trash, Kalani English, and all the trustees from OHA, along with a bunch of other people. And there were these two Mohawk Indians with briefcases, and they got on the stage and they started talking, and they were saying how we were all going to start connecting by what is now considered the internet. And we all kind of like looked at them like, what are they talking about? You know? And, you know, and that's how we were going to be able to connect with each other and know what's going on with our peoples and help support each other on a more global. And we were like, all like, what the heck are they talking about? We, you know, we all live far away from each other. We all live on, you know, have our issues. We don't know what's going on with each other because, you know, we didn't even have cell phones then, you know. And sure enough, that's how we're connecting, you know, now over activism. And, you know, so during those years, I became the diplomatic liaison for Kalahui, Hawaii, when Mililani was the lead person for Kalahui, Hawaii. And with that, I was responsible for treaty signing between different Indian tribes, and L. Frank's tribe was one of the tribes that we signed treaties with, a number of California tribes. And so that's kind of how I got my start. So the bottom line is that I just had really great mentors that led the way for me.
Yeah. That's incredible. I mean, and not to be cliche, but like that's the canoe that you have built with that knowledge, right? That you're like doing your thing and in these positions of power, I would say, to make decisions and work with communities and curate exhibitions. It's so cool. It's really, really cool. And just a side note, I got to go to Malki Museum, and I was doing a small lay exhibition. Anyways, so it was really, I was like, oh my gosh, I got to go there and see it. It was beautiful.
Well, in the early 1990s, the first powwow in Waimea happened.
Oh,
And Catherine Sobel and Edna Butler from Fort Mojave Reservation,
yeah.
and Oliver Red Cloud and his wife, and Bob and Natalie Rivera. Elle Frank was there, and and I had the wonderful privilege of organizing and escorting a very large group of Indians to the powwow. And included in that was also Harry Fonseca, who's a very famous American Indian artist, but what people didn't realize, he's also Hawaiian. So he was making his connection at that time. But yeah, so Catherine and Edna stayed in Waimea on Hawaiian Homestead at my Uncle Clarence's house. And he took them all the way to Hilo, to Punanaleo, because they were really interested in seeing the language immersion program there. And they were like two elders. I mean, they were probably our age, Elle, that we are now.
No, that's all right.
Right.
Yeah, and I took them to go see Auntie Margaret Machado.
Wow.
And it was real okay. And I know you want to talk to Ian, but I got to tell you this story because you guys are from
Don't worry about me.
Kona side. Kona
no.
side.
Keep it going, Mom.
We went to go see Auntie Machado at her school right on the coast, right? And two really great stories. So Catherine looks at me and she goes, I have to go to the bathroom. And for some reason, I just thought that they didn't have an indoor toilet, that they had an outdoor toilet. So I walked her all the way back in the property to the outhouse. And so I waited outside while she went to the bathroom, and she came out and she had a big smile on her face. And she said, oh my gosh, she goes, that reminded me when my husband was alive and we would sit in the two-seater and talk. And then later, we spent the whole day there. And then you know how it is in Kona, you have all the lava flow that goes out.
Yeah.
So I walked out there and I could feel something behind me, and I turned around, it was Catherine. And she started singing in Kauai, a song. And she told me later the song was the song that, her people, Kauai people, are desert people. They're like the Palm Springs area. But they would go to the coast where Elle's people's from, and they would do trading. And that's the song they would sing when they would see the Pacific Ocean. And so she sang that song, and all of a sudden a whale breached right in front of us.
Oh my God.
So anyway, so I'll let Ian have the mic now.
Oh,
I mean, seriously though, I'm not even like that interesting. How did I get my start? I mean, look who my mom is. So yeah. You know what I mean? Like it's that simple. It's that basic, right? Like, yeah.
Yeah, but
you
had a journey though.
Oh no, I mean for sure. I mean, yeah, we all have our own little individual sort of things, but again, like being like honored and privileged enough to be like the son of Carolyn Kuali. You know what I mean? So like being around all of the elders, like in like Puna, like experiencing like the engagement between different communities. I mean, I was a I was a hood kid, you know, like I did, you know, when I talk about like urban grit and, you know, like refined whatever in my bio, that's like, that's real. Like, you know, that's real. Like I wasn't always like, I was in the streets, like I was doing terrible things, but my mom is my mom. So I also had like all of these wonderful things to like look forward to, and like knowing who I was because of my mom knowing who she is, and the other individuals that are connected, you know, that I'm connected to through her. So yeah, I mean, that's how I got my start. I mean,
Yeah.
it was hip hop and it was indigenous, like, you know,
Yeah.
like Native Hawaiian culture and other indigenous cultures, like fortified.
Yeah.
That's what it was, you know. Activism, like I don't know, we had the conversation before. It's like I just my work is rooted in like our truth, you know what I mean? And the truth for me is like separate. It stands alone. It's not, I don't consider it radical. I don't consider it like activism. It just is what it is, right? It's like
Yeah.
just speaking our truth. And so
Yeah.
I don't consider myself an activist and or radical and or revolutionary. You know, and I can't really consider myself an educator. I mean, because again, like I feel like the truth is just the truth. Like, you know, like I'll share truth, and I guess in a sense that is sort of what makes me an educator, because I'm the willingness of being able to share it, or the responsibility of having to like share that truth. But yeah, I can't really. I mean, even to the point where it's like people ask me why don't I do like more mentorship of younger artists, and I encourage and I help, you know, in other ways, but I can't be like a mentor. I'm not like really built for that, you know. So like the idea of being an educator as well is like, yeah, not really my thing.
It's not super eloquent, but like a shiner of light is what you are. I mean, is one of the things that I would consider you through your art, you know. And it's if you wanted to share a little bit about the experience, a little bit or a lot of bit about the experience participating in this exhibit and even working with the collection, you know, because I think your piece for me, I get emotional when I talk about it because of what it means to me as a descendant of Keawe and the ki'i that is not in Hawaii right now. So yeah, if you want to share just a little bit about, or a lot of it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, well, like one thing I do want to get into, because you are a descendant of Keawe, like we're Kuli'is, right? And so like there's also this weird sort of like reconciling, you know, because there's always in our stories, there was always the comparison of your ancestor and our, you know, and our ancestor. And it's like, you know, like Kevi is a man, Kuli'i is a god, you know what I mean? Like, so there was always that weird sort of thing. You know, like, and so like having the honor and privilege of just accessing the photographic collection at LACMA, right? And realizing how many of the ki'i, it was just crazy to me. Like the amount, like what was it, like 10,000 photographs, right? So literally going through, like I think I only got through like 7,000 photographs. There were still like 3,000 I didn't even get a chance to touch on. But in that process, realizing how many of our sacred items were photographed, right? Such as like, you know, the burial offering ki'i of your ancestor. And so, and where they physically exist now, right? So one at the Field Museum and one at the Bishop Museum. Fortunately, we still have one in Hawaii, but the other one is in Chicago, right? And they're funerary objects, so they shouldn't even, you know, when we have the conversation around NAGPRA and repatriation, they should be home, right? And so like, okay, back to the photographs, like going through the thousands of photographs, realizing how many photographs there were of sacred items, funerary objects, and how they weren't labeled or they were completely mislabeled, right? But then going through, and then there's like Shirley Temple in like a Chinese gown, right? And it's completely like, this is Shirley Temple, like at the Hawaii Theater this year, like everything, like all of the facts were correct, right? All the details were correct. But like when it comes to like these sacred items, you know, like zero, like information. Hawaiian god carved out of wood, date unknown, you know what I mean? Like the name of the photographer is the only thing that is the actual, and maybe the date, right, is the only thing that's the actual fact. And so yeah, just, you know, like me being who I am, like I already sort of knew what it was. Like I have this responsibility to kind of, like you were saying, like shed light, you know, on this like really like heavy issue that deeply like affects our people, right? The piece in, like, you know, behind you, it's the two, it was the image of the two ki'i for Haleo Keawe, and the one that's completely absent and completely cut and void is the one that would be, yeah, represented, you know, the one that still exists in Chicago at the Field Museum. And so, and then the other one is like in the photograph, it was an undocumented other ki'i. And so I just wanted to kind of like bring attention to that, and how it's sort of an ongoing practice of museums globally, where they typically do not have the proper information, but they're still allowed to be considered the experts of our cultural patrimony, right? And I don't know, it's a difficult place to sort of navigate. I have a lot of friends that, you know, are younger Indigenous, or just Indigenous museum professionals in general, right? Like a lot of times, even when they have conversations with their, I guess, so-called upper echelon within these institutions, they're trying to, like, you know, talk about fact, or like, you know, re-cataloging things and getting things correct, right? They're met with a lot of feedback, because it's a lot easier just to be like, well, we're the experts, this is what it should be, we've been doing this sort of, like, you know, for hundreds of years, like, why does it need to change now, you know?
Yeah.
And then my mom being my mom. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. But it was super interesting, you know, like I remember the first phone call we had. Oh, and that was when you were like, oh yeah, and I'm looking to get this amazing, you know, California native artist named L. Frank to be in the exhibition. And I'm like, who? Who's that person?
No, yeah, it came up in our earlier conversations too with some of the other artists that this project, one, we're really just scratching the surface on you know, providing more opportunities for people to access the collection, and artists to create works that you know, focus on that, not reclaiming, but just giving a voice, you know, to show our stories, their stories. But even so, it's been compared to dusting off the family photo album. And then so in the hui of artists too, you know, Meliana was there, and I know she knows a lot of the ohana too. So that was really, really cool. Oh man.
You know, something about what Ian was just saying there. I did some miniature pieces, I made the first stone bowl by someone in our tribe in around 200 and something years.
Wow.
And the museum in Berkeley at the Hearst, where I've worked for about 20 years, I'm on their council. We had a miniature show. So I made two small stone pieces, one to cook on, you know, komol, to fry things on, and the other to boil things in. And I was in that museum not that long ago, and the new people, they want to change this. They're going to change this, but I opened up the drawer, they opened it up and said, look, and there were my pieces in the same drawers that I've been looking at for 25 or 30 years with all the other stone pieces, you know, from pre-contamination times. And I was so stoked to see my things there with those things. It's like, yes, this is so great. And then I picked them up and I looked at the label and it said fake. And my other piece said fake. And I was like, well, that's deflating.
Oh my God.
Right. And I mean,
Really?
I personally too, like when I hear stories like that, and I mean, those objects are also supposed to be used, right? So they're meant to boil things, they're meant to fry things, right? Like uh, my friend Rose Simpson did an exhibition, I forget with the institution, but they had a bunch of grinding stones that were just sitting there. And so like they got their society of, had the conversation to get those stones basically gifted to the society of grinders, you know what I mean? And so yeah, it's just, I mean, you know, like to me that's super important. Like so many objects, you know, so many important things or living objects exist in like the bowels of these, you know, universities and museums. And again, it's like it's a touchy and like really difficult thing to sort of build our canoe about, right? But like, yeah, it, you know, like can people have visitation rights at least, you know what I mean, like in the sense where these objects can go to the tribes that they know which tribe they belong to, right? And possibly be used in the manner that they were meant to be used for a bit. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And then they can go back into their, you know, luxury condominium drawer in like
Well,
the bowels of these places or something. I don't know.
Well,
that does already happen. Like there are several tribes in California that get to borrow their most sacred items when they have their sacred ceremonies. You
Right.
know, otherwise, when I went to Paris to look at this collection that had been taken there, and it had thousands of things taken. And when I walked into the room, first of all, I didn't understand French, and they kept trying to explain something to me, and I couldn't understand because the room I was in, there were just shelf after shelf after shelf of village life, of people, and everything in there just started crying because it was too far from home. Some things had been killed and brought back, you know, and it just a variety of things next to other things where they shouldn't have been next to. And it was such an emotional thing that I just started crying. The French didn't know what to do with me crying. I kept saying, I know you don't understand, but this is wrong. You know, so there's a lot of conversations to be had about working in museums and what are things and how they're feeling, because they were very expressive about not being happy to be there. Then there was that room full of skulls, you know, and then there were the shrunken heads that they pulled out at me. You know, it's like, yeah, that caused a lot of cussing from my end to their face. But yeah, you know,
I
there's a
think
lot of stuff about museums. I've spent 30 something years doing museum work and this kind of, and there's also something very exciting about finding something in you know, you paid a nickel to go in a Shaker museum in somewhere back east and East United States, and there's something from your people in this nickel museum in somebody's basement. So there's something about discovery and reinterpreting, or he talks about things being mislabeled or not knowing, and it happens all the time everywhere, you
Right.
know.
Like
So
like basket caps, right? Like
yeah,
always being viewed as like as like actual baskets, right? Instead of,
yeah,
you know, like consistently, like how many times I've witnessed that, you
yeah.
know?
and I
Yeah.
think if we, you know, when we think about collections in museums, you know, where did those collection originally
Right.
come from? And I'm not just talking about the indigenous cultures they came from, but they came because of curiosity of a collector. And, you know, I would say that whenever I've been involved in some kind of exhibit, it's always been around some rich person's collection. You know, we want to do this indigenous exhibit, you know, kind of focused on this collection that this very wealthy white family collected over their lifetime and then donated to the museum. And that's, you know, I think, you know, that's been my experience a lot of times is, you know, where exhibitions begin, because these museums want to bring these collections out because they've never been out before. And then, you know, when I'm working with them, they go, well, can't we bring this out? And I go, well, it doesn't really fit the storytelling, you know. You know, it really, you know, it really doesn't fit, you know. And
Yeah.
I mean, Elle, you remember when we worked with the Oakland Museum, all the stuff that we looked at from the Pacific, right?
Yeah, oh, yes.
And and that was all some family that were able that I think he was a dentist that, did a lot of work in the Pacific, and they just collected stuff.
And they say there was even another problem we ran into with that, in that I didn't realize that there were people who disagreed with me about that the Filipinos should be included in the islands. So I stepped into a giant can of worms with that one. I was like, oi, the Indian stuff isn't bad enough. Now the whole Pacific is like,
Right.
but so working with anything, with any people's things, it's so emotional. You never know where the emotions are going to go, because you don't know how they're feeling about this or that, because this is what their grandfather died of, or died for. And so we see things. So that's why everybody has to be listened to, really.
I think every time I work on a project, I always think it's the greatest project that I've worked on, because at the time it's just so special. And, and as the person that's a curator, you learn so much from your experience, but I think I have to speak to the Royal Hawaiian Featherwork exhibit at the De Young. That exhibit was extremely fragile and extremely important. And the reason for that is because all the items that were exhibited came from like 5 or 6 different museums from around the world. And I mean, the Hawaiian capes that came from England were the ones that Captain Cook had. I mean, it was just amazing that these cultural items that were ali'i items hadn't been in Hawaii for over 200 years, easy. And probably not even out of an archive. They'd been stored away, and they finally got a chance to come out for this exhibit. And it was a beautiful exhibit, because those featherworks are just gorgeous as heck. They're extremely beautiful work. But I remember Keone Nunes, when I took him through the exhibit, he looked at me and said, "They're all really sad."
Mm.
Just like you were talking, Al,
Mhm.
that you go and visit these items and they're sad because they're away from home. They're not being celebrated and enjoyed. And that's, even though the Hawaiian, the Royal Hawaiian Featherwork exhibit was monumental, because I don't think there'll ever be an exhibit like this again, not in my lifetime, not even at the Bishop Museum. But it was sad that all these items went back to the museums that they came from, that they had been for hundreds of years there.
How many of them were in private collections?
I don't know too much about the history, but I think the capes, the ones that Cook had, I think are in private collection.
Right.
But the rest of them came from, there were some things came from the bishop, but a lot of the old capes, I mean, I think the only thing that really came from the bishop was some of the paintings and the lays, but everything else came from like some major, some museums throughout the world, from like Australia, Italy, UK. And I think there were things in Russia, but at that time, the Russian museums were having issues. And then it went to LACMA, actually, right after. Not all of it. They were supposed to go to the bishop, but unfortunately the bishop pulled out of their contract, so it didn't get to go home, because they were all supposed to go to the bishop for exhibition. And because they pulled out, the exhibit did not go to the bishop. But LACMA went ahead in a very short notice and showed the ones from the bishop. And that was up for about, not very long, but yeah, but
That's unfortunate too, because I mean, wasn't that around the same time that the Kalani Opu'u?
mhm.
Yeah.
And I think that's
Aloha, can I
Mahiole
answer
and
for the
Ahu'ula,
stuff that
yeah.
was in the museum?
pardon.
Aloha, can I add for things that were for that LACMA museum, for that exhibit for Nahulali? Actually, majority of the cloaks were from Bishop Museum, as well as the kahili and the leis.
Right, everything at the LACMA was from the bishop. None of the other museums
Yeah,
articles
LACMA one.
were in LACMA. Yeah, they
I
went
think
back
the only
they went
private
back to the museums.
the only private collector that I remember being in that was Blackburn.
Were those
Had a
the
lane and some lane, I think one other piece. I think one of the much more older cloaks.
yeah. Weren't those the Captain Cook cloaks?
Yes, I
Yes.
believe.
Yeah, those were those were the only ones. The other ones came from all the other museums.
Yeah, so
Did you get to see the museum at the DeYoung?
I actually
Or
saw
the-
it. I saw it at both because I am the conservator for Bishop Museum.
Oh, okay.
So I got to work on all those pieces before they left. And then I helped Kamalu do the de-install at DeYoung, and then I helped her do the installation at LACMA.
Oh, so you didn't truck up with Kamalu. You got to have the plush flight in, right?
Because I was there with Kamalu when she arrived at the DeYoung.
Yeah.
And then I was there at LACMA, not for install though, but for when it opened.
Yeah, so because actually it was a last minute decision to bring me on, I really wasn't there for a lot of the opening and closing ceremonies that took place. So I was kind of like the hidden girl in and out, helping
Yeah.
help, my kuleana was to make sure that when Kamala and I took things out of the crates, that they were aloha'd, and that we did our best to install them properly and showed either the DeYoung staff or the LACMA staff how we wanted them to be handled. And then I was out.
Yeah.
I mean, shout out to you and Kamalu. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
that's a serious like undertaking. Like,
yeah,
because I mean,
But
as beautiful as they are, as just like feather works. You know what I mean? Like, they are so much more than just beautiful pieces of feather work. So yeah,
Yeah.
like, mahalo for that.
When they arrived at the DeYoung, we actually had the Ohlone people come and welcome all the feather works. And they were still in the crate when they did the blessing and welcome.
Was that Karina and everybody?
Karina came, and I can't remember who else. And Kamala was the only one there from the bishop at the time. She had just arrived on the truck
She talked about the truck.
the long ride up from LA.
Yeah, and just the stress, because it's the museum brought up a lot of stuff. Like Kamal and I were extremely stressed out at the amount of feather work that we knew how important this was, because we knew that both San Francisco and LA has a Kanaka community, and that this was important for them to see. And this may be the only time they get to see, because we can't always assume that Kanaka can afford to come back home
For sure.
and come and see these things at Bishop Museum. So we knew that
also Kamalu, being from the diaspora, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, being from Southern California, like LA County, you know what I mean? Like, it was probably like in her own way, like, it has to, it already has to be done proper, right? But like,
yeah,
it's Los Angeles now.
And I have to say that for the DeYoung exhibit, we had thousands of Hawaiians that showed up for that. I mean, I worked over a
Yeah,
year.
but half of them were Patrick McCullough.
No, well,
hello.
you know what, Patrick McCullough has a big halau, and so does Mark Umalu, and they both of their halaus came. But honestly, I worked a lot with the community, and we started a year in advance and really marketed the exhibit to the Hawaiian community. And so that's one thing that I think was really great about the Diang. I was there for the opening for the LACMA too, and that was not so much Hawaiians came to that on the opening as much as a lot of the California Indian people came.
Mm-hmm.
And but it was really beautiful to see the community come out for the show. And yes, it was, I mean, I think they were really excited, you know, being Hawaiians that are away from home, to be able to see these capes and, you know, feather works. But actually a lot of what was at the Diang was not at LACMA. And so I just wish that what was at the Diang was able, I wish that was unfortunately not able to make its way back home to Hawaii, because I even think people in Hawaii would have, they too should have had the opportunity to see many of these feather works that have been locked away in Europe for a long time.
For sure.
And that's, you know, that was a disappointment for me that it didn't get to go home.
Yeah. It was a complete devastation, because at the time, I was working at Bishop Museum, but I was also still contracted under Miley Meyer to do certain events for her for Native Books on Hawaii. And at that time, I was contracted to help her with selling books at Mary Monarch. And I had been doing that for several years prior to joining the museum. And so a lot of the vendors who were at the Opportunities Civic Center, who had known that I worked for Miley and figured out that I worked at the museum, they came up to me and were extremely devastated. They're like, why can't the museum house it? Why can't we have this exhibit? And to feel like I had to be the spokesperson and be like, I'm so sorry, uncle, like we are just not financially stable enough to house something like this. And you know, it's a lot of money and it's a lot of insurance for us to transport these objects. We're talking about things that are valued at millions and millions of dollars, and the insurance for those things are really, really hard on us. And there were a couple of people who were like, why didn't you let us know? We could have helped out. We could have done something. I know people at like Island Cargo, and it's like, well, as much as like we love Island Cargo, the agreeing institution has to, you know.
Yeah, it's what it is, and it's too bad, but who knows, maybe someday, generations from now, somebody will be able to do it again.
Yeah.
Like the conversation around value systems too, right? Like it's just like the Bishop Museum couldn't take it on because some of these living objects were valued at millions of dollars, right? So the insurance and all these other, the financial number, right? But like the value system of like what it actually means to the people is like infinitely more valuable than said dollar amount, right? Like it's just, you know, like I don't know, it always trips me out, you know, like the weight of gold versus, you know, the value of whale tooth culturally to certain Hawaiian folks, right? You know what I mean? It's always disheartening.
Yeah, when we were in Latvia, a California artist, George Blake Porty, he had a small piece of jewelry and it had some diamonds set in it, and everyone was freaked out there in Latvia, freaked out over the insurance of this, and they were, yet everything else he had and everything else we all had, it didn't have any diamonds in it, but they were rocks and they were baskets and they were, you know, twigs and sticks, which we valued far greater than that. And that, yeah.
Okay, I want to be conscious of everyone's time and also of Ian's
gosh.
bedtime.
It's well beyond my bedtime, but the beautiful thing is I could just always lean up against the wall, get a little cozy and cute.
Oh my gosh, we
Perfect.
only have 15 more minutes.
I know. I had one question that if anyone from our audience wants to ask a question, you can type it in the chat or interrupt me. Otherwise, I was thinking about part of the conversation we had the other day, and how we talked about, trendy words of decolonization that people are using. And, I think what we've been talking about, even the value system, who's making these decisions in exhibitions. Carolyn, you talked about how these collections are even started and how they grow. It's obvious that like every level of, we were talking about is the decolonization of museums even a possibility when the institution of museums is such a foreign concept to I would say most indigenous cultures, right? If correct me if I'm wrong, but we talked about certain elements of indigenous perspectives and values being inserted or used by museums to change things. But I just wanted to, if there's any way to kind of I think talk about that a little bit, because we love, I use the word decolonize, but maybe we could just share some of the thoughts around that, and what could the future of museums and even the art community and representation of indigenous people look like in the future, a more just future.
Yeah. Well, you can look at the Burke Museum in Washington State. And I was working with some architects. We didn't get the bid for the California State Indian Museum that they promised us 100 years ago. And the whole thing is, they had a couple of us talking with them about museums and our work within them. And I have to go wherever it says don't go in order to see things. That's how I started getting access. If it said don't enter, if the knob turned, I turned it. That's how I got locked in the basement of the Louvre for a couple of hours one time. So you have to break all these laws to see things, what you're interested in, because it's just like when scientists go out and gather information on us, they write a book on, oh, this is what the Hawaiians like to do. Well, it's what you're interested in, but all their notes have a whole lot more meat to them. It's what we're interested in. So museums can move, and a few have started moving towards, so the collections, no one has just like access, but you can see the collections. They're not hidden away in some secret place that you have to know somebody who knows somebody to get in. So let alone just access and designing for access, designing for, many times, if something isn't poisoned with something to save it, then let me hold it with my bare hands, because we're always fighting the museum people. Oh no, don't hold that basket. But our ancestors held the basket. Don't hold that basket because you have greasy hands. Well, our ancestors held the basket. Yeah, but they didn't eat hamburgers. We have ridiculous conversations like that with museum people. And then museum people, they want to show you something, but they go, this has been exposed to the light for 2 days too long, so we have to put it back. And it's like, well, again, you're not understanding that some things have to die. Not everything lives forever just because you want it to. So there are museums that are very slowly beginning to listen to the indigenous. I work at the Oakland Museum. They let us, and then we're sad because somebody changed what we Native Council did. We won an award because they said, okay, we're gonna videotape people in their own tribal areas, and we'll send out our videographer. And I said, well, natives can have video cameras. So they said, oh, all right. So they let us videotape the elders in our areas. And they let us, they actually listen to us. The biggest thing is listening. And I could go on forever because I do have lists. But there is small change. So
Yeah, I think Makana made like a really beautiful like comment about like it's just more so about like indigenizing space, right? Because I mean we're going to be there anyhow, you know what I mean? Like our cultural items are in these spaces, so you can't really decolonize something that is colonial at its foundation, right? And that continues to uphold like ivory tower perspectives. And so like I mean, you know, I hear it all the time, like re-indigenizing space, like what exists beneath the foundation of these institutions, you know, the bones of people's ancestors, most likely, right? So re-indigenizing space, the importance of both parties listening to each other, right? There's, I mean, because you can't have any real change without, you know, the so-called powers that be. Yeah, see, our spaces already existed, you know what I mean? Of course, you know what I mean? So it's just, so it's about like how do we reaffirm that, right? And with these people that have this perceived idea of power within these institutions, right? Because they're the experts, because they have the higher degrees, they have the PhDs. What's up, Dr. Alfrank? And you know what I mean? And they're the experts, so they're the gatekeepers. They're usually the ones that get to determine and say how and what things, you know, how they move and how they shift and what can and cannot happen, right? If you're allowed to touch something that your family may literally have a connection to, like it may have been made by one of your ancestors, right? But figuring out a way to have those difficult conversations with each other, and not so much like a seat at the table, but like realizing that like forget a table, like you and I are human, you know what I mean? Like you and I are human. Let's just have a conversation about these things, regardless of how difficult it is, regardless of me maybe challenging your expertise, you know what I mean? Even though you just read about it in the book, where my family may have literally been the person, like the people that gave that knowledge that ended up in a book that some doctor wrote about later on, that you're using as your like basis for research, you know? Like it's such a trip to me that it's that sort of way. But like we need to start having these difficult conversations and really listening to each other, and we don't always have to agree on things, you know what I mean? Like as a matter of fact, if it comes to like really disliking one another, then it comes to that, you know what I mean? Like, you know, but there has to be some sort of real change, and not necessarily from that kind of trend word decolonize, you know, or whatever the trend word of the day be. And like and just like you, like I use the term decolonize, you know. Mom, what are your thoughts?
Deinstitutionalize.
But that's the thing,
I mean,
though, right? Because like
me,
some people are so institutionalized,
well, I mean, because
of the universities that they went to and whatever.
Yeah, I mean, museums are institutions that I feel are foundationed in, you know, like in scholarship. And I mean, just that whole thing is a world unto itself. And it's an old school that is holding on to its traditions.
Yeah, literally an old school.
No, seriously,
it's like literally an old school way of thinking.
That's holding on to their traditions, and those traditions don't change overnight. What I'm hopeful for is that there are a new generation of especially Indigenous individuals that are going into museum work, that they come out of their education with sense of deinstitutionalizing things.
Well, I think it's important to realize first too, like if you are an Indigenous person, right, and you are holding this high degree and you are moving into the museum field, to remember that first and foremost, like you're a cultural person, right? Like you come, like you have like it, like you probably have, like your ancestors, you probably have items from your culture in those museums, right? So you have a greater responsibility. What I find really like super difficult, and I know it's super hard to navigate, right? like a lot of individuals who are indigenous that move into the museum field, they just become like gatekeepers, like the people that they sought out to
Yeah.
kind of like dismantle.
Well,
right?
and I saw that like even in the university and, like in graduate school where everybody's complaining how how you're treated when you're in graduate school, but yet when they get their degree and they start working in, in this as a scholar, then they start treating their students like they were treated. And
Dr.
it's
L.
like
Frank, you better never, ever, ever.
It's like-
I'm already mistreating
Ever,
people
ever,
now.
ever.
perpetuating.
I'm mistreating people and I'll take bribes, all kinds of things.
Yeah, so I mean,
I love you.
I think when it comes down to it, it's going to be, for those that are going to go into the field, it's going to be for them to check in on their own selves and their kuleana, how they interpret their kuleana is to their culture, to their ohana, to their legacy, to their genealogy. I think that's where and I don't think it's going to be that easy because chances are there's always going to be that old school that still wants to continue doing business the way it's always been done.
And boom, and that's kind of the thing, right? Like, again, like the language behind it, like the business of, right? So like this constant like cycle and because like, let's be completely like transparent about it. Like American philanthropy in the arts is like super problematic. You know what I mean? And then a lot of the people that they're funding are usually the loudest in the room people that are super quick to spout out decolonization, but they're the ones that are soaking up all these funds as well, right? So there's this really difficult like teetering kind of happening right now with that sort of thing, where it's like the billionaire that maybe feels a little bit of guilt, so they're like, I'm going to give money to this very politically vocal indigenous person, and then they're the one that gets the funding, then they become the expert, then they become the gatekeeper, and then there's no decolonization. Like, let's be completely honest about it.
Oh yeah,
Sure,
like
with 12 seconds left.
yeah, well, in the 12 seconds, like for instance, if you look at applications for art fellowships or art grants, why don't we decolonize it and make it more accessible for indigenous artists to be able to get funded instead of making it barriers for them to access things when it comes to, to be able to support their vision, their talents.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have been chased with neo-Nazis and had to, well, maybe I would have. I wouldn't have had to have been forced to live with people who had escaped insane asylums, who their friends were cannibals, if I'd have had a little bit of support, just a little bit of support even. Good thing I took tortillas with me and could eat a sausage and potatoes once there. On that note.
On that note, Ian must have pressed the wrong button and kicked himself out.
He's done man spreading for us.
All right. Maybe he's on a timer when it's time to go to bed. Everything shuts.
Yeah.
That's a possibility. We've been having some great comments and emojis from folks in the joining us. Makana had shared, as Ian had shared her messages. But Makana or Darrell, if anyone wants to jump in and say any thoughts or remarks about the discussion, that'd be awesome. No pressure, or even Miho or Juliet. Oh, they're saying thank you, Caitlin. Thank you all so much for this wisdom shared. So
I feel like we need to have more discussions.
I
This was
know.
deliciously meeting.
We're
touching the surface.
Yeah, minimum 2 hours. I should have made this a 2-hour Zoom. And then we could have just jumped in. But
well,
yeah.
I appreciate comments from people that called in too, and it wasn't just us. So that's great.
Yeah, Nicole, mahalo for jumping in and sharing your experience with the Hulu Ali'i exhibition. And yeah, I would love it if anyone wants to connect or share their information even. And actually, oh, Makana cannot video or audio now. But what I'm going to do is put in the link for the digital catalog for the exhibition. If anyone wants to check out the other artworks in the show. And I can also, for the few that are in here, I can put in my email if you have any other questions or we just want to get in touch and talk story. Yeah, it's very regenerative to be able to talk story with this hui. Really, I think it could be a fabulous standing meeting. Maybe every Thursday pauhana. Nah, I know everyone's busy. Yeah,
Thank you very much.
yeah.
Yeah, we tried not to go all over the place for you, so.
No, that was perfect. I think like Miho was saying, I feel like we took some deep, heavy bites into the conversation. Oh, Ian is calling me.
Well, tell them it's too late.
No, we're going to bed now.
Hey, Ian. They're going to bed. Oh, wait, can you jump back on or? Okay. I don't know. Okay. Okay, cool. See you soon. Dorel also commented, I loved hearing all the stories, the experiences. I think it is important to have them. I'm Rotuman and in academia for my PhD on tattoos, and I've been really trying to find the right balance between gatekeeping and sharing and reawakening our cultural tattoos without the commercialization and capitalization. So hearing these stories are beautiful. Mahalo, Dorel. Awesome.
Darrell, I'd love to hear more about your work with tattooing. Because I'm working with a group called Indigenous, what are they called? Indigenous Association of
Yeah.
Ancestral Markings.
Yeah. Hello,
Oh.
everyone.
Hi.
I don't know what happened.
Yeah, so bizarre.
Back to the technology thing and me. I don't, you know. Also, I just wanted to take a moment just to say mahalo to Nicole for sharing everything earlier. Yeah, I don't know why. I just got like booted off or something. And then I was like, oh, perfect time to use the bathroom. I don't know. Anyway.
No,
Too much information, I know.
Your bladder is synced to your end call. Maybe Darrell can't do video like some of the other attendees. He says he's asking IMMA.
Yeah, I told him yes. That's
Oh.
the group, and I'm going to send him a link.
Oh, okay, cool.
Oh, are you talking about the organization that you helped out Keone and everybody with regards to indigenous ancestral markings?
Yeah.
This stuff, these things.
I personally don't care for tattoos, but that's all right.
There you go, Mom. Wise. See, I wish I knew how to do these things. Like, let me drop a link into the chat or something. Yes, there you go. Yes, I am. So, were we on to questions? I don't know what I missed because
It's already 8:36. I mean,
Yeah, the questions have all been answered.
okay. Ta-da.
we even answered for you, Ian. We hope we gave the right answer.
If there's two people on this planet that have the absolute right to speak on my behalf, it's you, Mom, of course, and L. Frank.
Yeah.
And Mina, you're going to be in that list pretty soon as well. So one of these days you could just do like a printout like face mask or something of me, and then I won't even have to do these things that frighten me any longer.
So Nicole, one question, did you get to work on any of the Heinalu boards that came? And
I did indeed. Kaiolani surfboard was in my lab, and I cleaned it up a little bit because there was some old, unfortunately, it was a very, very old exhibit that the museum had done prior to me being there. The previous mount, somehow there was some paint from the previous mount on the rails of the board, so
Oof.
I had to take some of that off. But I helped pack Duke's board. What else? I did see a couple of the medals that had come through, but basically I had more contact with the surfboards than I did the medals. So it was, for me, because I'll be very clear, I am not Kanaka. I come from plantation people. So, but I have been extremely fortunate that both Kanaka and Pacific Islanders have been extremely welcoming to me as far as opening up their culture to me. So for me being at the museum, it's my way to give back, to make sure that these things are here for as long as we can have them. And I care for them in the sense of, as long as they want to be around, I will continue to care for them. And if the community feels that they should be at peace and go elsewhere, if that means repatriation, so be it. That's the way I view it. In my current schoolings, which is really, really sad. I'm in an institution that is purely white, non-Indigenous people who don't really understand Indigenous conservation. So I always feel like I'm the girl fighting for Indigenous voices in my classes. But I don't know, it's just, when
And
you're
you know,
born,
and we need more of that as well. You know what I mean? Like, and I
Yeah.
thank you again for like, you know, you're like sharing, and then also the fact that you know, yeah, like, you know, allies and accomplices are super real. Like, we need them. You know, if we're to make any like forward progress,
Mhm.
you know, it's needed.
Yeah, I agree on so many levels. I mean, my previous MA with Pacific Island Studies is talking about the same thing, that we need more Indigenous people in museums, especially in the conservation lab, because conservators are the ones that do most of the hands-on touching. And in order for us to understand how these things were made and how best to care for them, we can't always rely on a Western method. A Western method can help to a certain degree, but we also need to rely on the community that actually has made these things, because they are the
Right.
ones that know best how they were constructed, and also can provide the tools for us to also care for them as well. We can't always rely on Western knowledge. Western knowledge is just too much. It's too strict, and it drives me nuts. And I know I like irritate probably a ton of heads when I talk about this, but it's just, when you're raised here and you have so much influence from community, that you try to be an ally, because I'm very fortunate to have the position that I have. So I'm trying to use it in the best way possible to speak for Indigenous community, but not, I guess, speak entirely for them, but just to pass on, when they don't have an opportunity to talk to other staff members, at least
Right.
pass on their thoughts on how we can better care for these things. So
Yeah, I mean, there's great power, privilege, and responsibility when it comes to proximity, right? And so
Yeah.
like, yeah, I mean, you know, even though, you know, an individual may not be Indigenous, say from like Southern California, right? Like Los Angeles, right? but they have like a great like privilege of existing and living on that land. So it's the same thing with objects, right? Like you're given this great privilege. Like, what are you going to do with it? You know what I mean? If you're not one of the silenced, you know what I mean, then you have the power of voice, and that's a great privilege as well, right? And you being within proximity, how are you going to use those tools of privilege to help elevate others, right?
Well,
Yeah.
and sometimes in the, we've been talking as if museums and people respect somebody like me who's considered extinct, that we actually know anything. They don't. They
Right.
think we know nothing. And therein is the topic of, well, magic and genes, genetic memory, all that kind of things that our peoples believe in. It's been very hard to get people to believe that you can take care of your land if you've never taken care of land, that you know what this is, even though you've never seen it. And yet that actually happens. So there's a whole lot of it's not just people, allies and support. Sometimes it's just us. We're not educated enough, smart enough. We haven't read the same book, so therefore we don't know anything because we're extinct. It's different when somebody comes in who has 300,000 people in their tribe. Well, you must know something. You have many people. So there's a whole lot of work to be done from
And-
all angles.
Yeah, and to be quite honest, sometimes I think, I get invited to do an exhibit, but then I feel like as I get involved, I feel like I'm the token. And I'm the token because I have the resources that they need to be able to pull it off, instead of letting me do what they asked me to do, and that was to curate. And, so I run into that too. And, where I'm always having to be, I'm always having to stick up for what I feel I've been called to do. And especially if they've asked me to actually curate, but yet they just really want my connections,
Exactly. Yeah. I got put on a museum piece. That's how I met Jane, down in my homelands, because this museum had contacted no one of the people there. And so they threw me in. You're an artist, get thrown in, which I don't mind. And I took a big stick with me and whacked a few people with it. But yeah, there's all kinds of things happening out there just when you're trying to do something for your people. There's all
And
kinds.
Elfrink has lots of sticks.
I do, and
to
they're
whack
sharp and
people
they
with.
poke people's in the eye. I do. It's true.
Yeah.
Wow, I see. There's Lena Baumlin. Oh, hey, Lena. Oh, I didn't know if we were supposed to shout out, but hey, Lena.
Yeah, I think it's the shout out time. I'm gonna shout out also Caitlin. Says Western European thinking is impossibly linear. The burden of proof when so much has been destroyed is just a way to reinforce colonialism and ownership. Yeah.
Right. But again,
Right.
like leaning back in on the idea of like the idea of ownership and scholarship, right? Like, what are the origins of that knowledge anyhow? It comes from a lot of people, that are dead and gone, or elders that we still have that are existing, that are still here with us, that gave that knowledge to an individual and like some level of trust, right? So it's like that, just because somebody told it to you doesn't mean that you have ownership of it. Like it's, I don't know. Anyway, Lena, can I see your face really quick? Are you able to turn on your camera? No? Are you able to?
We can hear you.
There you are.
Oh, you can hear
Aloha.
us?
We
Yeah.
think you're
How are
beautiful.
you?
Just, yeah, your hair looks
Yes.
nice.
I just wanted to see you really quick, and I wanted to say love you, and it's been a long time. You chime in every once in a while on social media, but
Oh my
I just
gosh,
wanted to
turn it
send
off,
you some
right?
love and see you.
No, turn that light off. Hi. No. Hey. Everyone,
Aloha.
Awesome.
What do you mean hi? Where's Ayuki or Ayukui or what do you mean hi?
Aloha. I'm muted. Oh,
I love. Lena, where are you joining us from?
oh, Crescent City.
Oh,
California.
nice, nice.
I
Right
had a
on.
long day today.
Oh,
Lena was years and years ago when we first went up to way up Northern California near the Oregon border and Hoopa, Kudak, Karuk and Yurok and Talawak territory and started doing tattooing of the natives there.
wow.
So, and
Yeah, so
helped
like
my
having that
guide.
conversation around like tattoo revitalization, right? Like it was, I guess, being touched upon as I was rejoining the Zoom.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, and then we have one of our beloved individuals, you know, and extended family members showing up. So
It's
yeah.
been over a year. Last May, we had Keone back with his apprentice, some helpers, and we did 23 chins.
Yeah.
Right.
And my daughter was one of them. My granddaughter had her wrist markings. So at that point, he did 3 generations of us,
Yeah.
which was
Yep.
amazing.
Mhm.
And people don't understand, like some people saying, well, that's not your traditional way, but the spirit brought him to us at a time when it was really important to fill in that hole, that piece that was missing. And I tell people that they ask, well, did it hurt? Go, yeah, but not very long. I mean, we give birth to children. That's not a big deal, you know. And I said, were there tears? I go, yeah, there were tears. There were tears that were released from my childhood, because the community I grew up in was really cruel to me because I was a little brown girl. And so that was, I'm not invisible anymore. That's, I always tell people that's one of the reasons I had mine. This is my maternal great-grandmother's pattern, great-great-grandmother.
Mm.
And the community would like us to still be invisible. The community I grew up in is still not a great place. And the community I'm in now is not much better. But for our children, my youngest granddaughter was 2, and she sat there and she watched her sister get her lines, and she watched women get their tattoos, and her auntie, my daughter, got hers. And at the end of it, she was going like this, which means more in sign language for kids. She wanted more. And so when our little 2-year-old now plays dress up, she draws her lines on her wrist. She's just, and our other girls, they grew up to play, they draw their tunes on. So for us, that's another piece. We've been doing ceremony for a long time. We've started revitalizing that back in the 70s. But to get this part is just, I always tell people it's a piece of the puzzle. We have this giant puzzle and the pieces have been thrown to the universe. You know, we're survivors of genocide.
Right.
And a genocide that people don't want to acknowledge and realize. But through the spirit, we have brought back ceremony. We have brought back traditions, and little pieces of the puzzle get filled in. Every time I can bring back a traditional way of doing something for the ceremony, it's another piece to our puzzle. And that's another win, because we're still here. We're still standing strong. Elle, I had a dream about you how many years ago before you started making canoes, and I had a dream about, I could still see the dream, a log laying half in the water, half out under a bridge in a city. And I said, you were going to work on a canoe. And that was long before that, your journey. So we're all connected for a reason. And the spirit brings us together for a reason. I'm tired. I went down last night. My oldest grandson graduated 8th grade, and he read a speech, and it blew my doors off. He talked about being an indigenous person, because he comes from many tribes in Northern California between his mom and his dad, and how his first language was Talo Deni, and how it's important to carry that on so he can know his ancestors. I mean, we were sitting there just crying. He had a whole row of his aunties and his grandparents and his moms and aunties and uncles. And man, he had us in tears. It was just beautiful. It was like, oh my God, we're so lucky to have
You got
this
me in
next
tears.
generation. If you could hear the speech, it was like, oh God, it just blew us away. And I'm going, oh my God, you know, all this work we've done our whole life. And sometimes we feel guilty about putting that burden on our children, but it's like when you see what's come out of it with the grandkids, it's like, oh my God, there's just no words. It's just beautiful. And we're getting ready to do another for one of the great nieces next weekend, her coming of age ceremony, and then we have our ceremony, and then we're doing kind of mean brush dance for the first time in about 3.5 years. That's coming up first week of August, and it's like that's when I do my work. I'm going, I'm a lot older than I was last time I did it. I hope I can do it. Jeez. But yeah, I mean, here in Northern California, that's what we do. We do ceremony. We support each other. And you're talking about the things in museums, and it's like it's always been an issue. We've had songs come to us when we were back in Suitland at the collections in Maryland, and that the items that are in museums don't know we still exist, because by all means we shouldn't be here, but we are. And so the songs come, and then we have to leave some of the items, and it's sad. But for them to know that we're still singing our songs, we're still out there, because every song has its own life, and it comes to those they want the song to be heard. So there's so much it's a way of life. It's like what you guys are talking about tonight, it's just a scratch on the surface, because there's so much. It's everything. It's the land we live on is alive, and it needs the prayers. And I always tell the young people, you get lost, you pray, and those answers will come to you. And they're not going to come in letter form. They're going to come in your heart. And that's what you have to listen to, because those spirits have been out there since the creation of time, and they're waiting for you to ask for help. And when it comes, you have to believe it. And when you need someone in your life, you pray for that person. I saw Lauren in a dream before I met him. And I've been stuck with him for 47 years.
Oh.
Be careful what you wish for.
I'm extremely grateful to the both of you for praying for me and cleansing me during Ancestral Inc. prior to the event. Yeah, I deeply needed that. And so I'm extremely grateful to the both of you for all of existence. When this flesh is long gone, the spirit's still going to be thankful.
Well, you're welcome. We
Love
you too.
love you.
And I love following your work. We're still treading away up here through the pandemic and all the things that we've gone through. But we had a win. ICWA was upheld, so our Indian kids can continue to be safe. But we fight our own battles. We went and supported one of the big head dancers at Elam a few weeks ago. And I haven't been for several years. So I wanted to support Robert and Hugh Geary. And when the first big head dancer walked in, it just took my breath away. It was so beautiful. And the people who are out here doing all this grassroots work are just people who were chosen to do this work. And they don't have support from tribes, because tribes aren't about the spiritual guidance of natives anymore. It's about the spiritual leaders who were chosen. We went through a really hard time with Lauren and his tribe a couple years ago. So, but keep treading away, guys, because Carolyn, when I was hearing you talk about the Hawaiian collection, that's how we feel about our collections, our pieces. When I went to Santa Barbara one time, their little private museum they have there, and didn't have federal dollars, so there's no repatriation. But I got to sing the dresses and touch them, and I love everything. The first time I ever bought a cap and opened it up, I cried, because I don't know where it's been, but it's home and it's not going anywhere. So, and that's how you guys feel with your items and stuff, but everything has its spirit, everything's alive. Keep working with it. People who work in the museums know that they're Indigenous people who know, and they might not have the PhD, they might not have the master's, but they have the spirit and they have the responsibility of taking care of those things. And those are the ones you need to reach out to. Because if you're in Indian country knows who are the ceremonial leaders and who work with items. And so, but you keep doing good work, guys. And I got busy with family cooking dinner, so I got on late. But yeah, I've been listening off and on between the granddaughter.
The community is vast and the work is never done.
Oh,
right?
No. There's so much. But, after hearing my grandson last night, 8th grade, and he's so proud, he's almost as tall as his dad, way taller than me now. But, the work is coming through the next generation. That's what's just so amazing. I'm so proud I could just burst. between my granddaughters and my grandsons. I was like, oh my God, it's so worth getting old for. I'm glad I lived long enough to got to hear his speech last night. It's just beautiful. So yeah, keep treading away, everybody. We're hanging in there with a good fight, and the daughter's working at Native Cultures Fund, Pim's at Humboldt Area Foundation now, and son's working for New York Tribe in education. His kids are amazing, and my youngest son started doing language again at the tribe. So we're doing our little part in Northern California. Real
Can I-
true Northern California, not the Bay Area. Next to
Can I
Exactly.
next time there's a mass tattooing taking place, can I come up and visit during?
well, yeah, if it happens again, we gotta bring him
Okay.
from Thailand.
I
But
know.
he's
I
passing
mean,
on now. He's
yeah,
passing, I think.
Kamali'i is doing great
Yeah.
work. So yeah,
And he
you
did
know.
Teishu, and Teishu was really,
Oh, that's
had
right, because
that village.
Kamali'i went out with Keone, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah, he
did
introduced him
Corey
to
go out as
everybody.
well?
Yeah, Corey
Corey
went
was
out
here, yeah.
too.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna lay my leg, but I'm going, okay, I got my chin, I got my wrist, and what I'm gonna do. So I don't know if I could lift my leg this high. I had it angled. And so it's the pattern that's on the cap when I do my work. And
Oh.
Corey interpreted it and drew it up, and then he tapped it. He tapped it really hard. And they says, I think he's getting back at you for getting smart with him all the time. Because I brought a photo
Nina,
album for when I had
Nina, do
mine
you
done.
see the artwork behind me?
Uh-huh.
Corey.
Yeah, I love what Corey does.
Yeah.
So I brought a photo album when I had my tattoo, and all the women that are there looking at going, who's this guy in this book? I go, that's Keone, but he has gray hair. I go, I know. So I teasing him. He goes, because he has black hair now. It's like, uh-huh. He says, we traded places. Back then you had black hair and I had gray hair. Now you have gray hair and I have black hair. He tapped really hard putting that ankle tattoo on because I teased him so much. But yeah, we had fun. It was nice. And it rained so hard while they were here. It was amazing. As soon as they were done, the sun came out. It was really cool. So, but I spent one day cooking for him, and he stopped at the end of it. He's sitting there eating. He goes, oh, you can cook. I go, yeah, that's what I do. We had a lot of fun though, but it was really, and they ended up having to do more in 2 days. That they were going to do it over 3, but ended up being 2. So they worked really late every night, and they were tired. But we had
Wait, how many chins did they do total?
23. And they did several other tattoos too, but 23
Amazing.
chins.
Amazing.
So it was very amazing.
Mhm.
I think Tim's working on doing something with that documentation. And they had some people do some filming first day. But
And of course, Keone was probably there with his Leica camera, snapping away.
He was working. No, he was working.
He showed
There
me
was-
his camera and I got
Yeah.
one just like it. I couldn't help it. I have to be just like him.
Is that
Of
the one?
course.
Is that the
Of course,
one
the both
that
of you did.
is that the one that what's his name gave him?
Who? Jason Momoa?
Uh-huh.
Someone gave him
Uh,
that Leica. He didn't
Jason
tell me that
Momoa
part.
gave him one.
Jason Momoa gave him one because I think Jason Momoa is sponsored by Leica for Leica Craft, I believe.
Oh.
Yeah.
No, but we had a blast, and it was just it was a really good way of coming out of the pandemic for us.
I just saw an arm all of a sudden. If they're gonna let their presence be known a little bit, they have to at least say hello.
It was probably the granddaughter running in and out. He's running in and out.
I love how this talk basically just turned into this community engagement, the way it's supposed to be, right? Like just, you know.
Yeah.
I know
love
we're going to 9 o'clock now.
Half an
Wait, no,
hour over.
that means I'm going into 10 o'clock.
We hit our 2 hour time limit. That means we can continue on the next Thursday. But no, because it doesn't always happen. This interaction, the talk story element, which is so important, it doesn't always happen in our artist talk. So,
Right.
you know, I feel
Especially
like
in Hawaii, you know.
the people who are here like are meant to be here, and they can share the recording to the other artists and anyone else who is interested. So I'll let you folks know. To Elle, Carolyn, Ian, do you guys want to close it out in any certain way? Otherwise, yeah, what do you think?
Well, just for
I
me, I
think-
just want to say
yeah.
mahalo to everybody for hopping on with us today. And it was great conversation. So nice, Lena, that we got to see your face.
Yeah.
And Mina, mahalo nui for your work. And I'm gonna come and see you on the Big Island one of these days.
Yeah, yes,
We should
yes, yes.
definitely plan a trip out.
Be
Yeah.
with me. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, you have family too.
Lehu
but-
and I got to go take a look at property anyway in like Puna. So, yeah.
Do
But
it.
yeah,
Yeah.
like for me, yeah, I mean, I'm always grateful to like share space with people. You know what I mean? Like I'd mentioned before, I don't do really good with like big crowd type stuff, and this Zoom stuff like always kind of frightens me to begin with. Like I don't know, like because me speaking isn't really, it's like whatever, you know. Hence the reason why I was like, can I bring my mom on instead so my mom could talk about the important work and I could just be over here like nodding my head. But yeah, extremely grateful to, you know, all of you for joining us, and everyone that like shared in the comments, and Nicole for like, of course, like letting us know about all of the work with the bishop, and you know, shout out to Miley Meyer as well, doing the work with Miley, and with the whole Meyer family. Yeah, like grateful, extremely grateful.
Yeah.
Mina, thank you.
No,
Yes,
thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh yeah, shout out to our new friend Caroline too. How's the hair?
Yes.
How's the hair going? What's the hair update?
Caroline.
What's going on here? Is it done?
Ooh,
Yeah, see,
here,
this is
wait.
Oh,
Well, now I'm in my car. I'm picking up food to go. How do you like my new look?
amazing.
You look
And
fabulous.
Yeah, I had to leave Susie's place because she was tired, had to go home and feed her dogs. And I'm sitting here waiting for my to-go order from L&L's to go home and enjoy a quiet evening at home after a busy day.
Hey,
So thank you
just-
so much for your
I'm
insight.
on.
I
I'm
can't
on
wait
Zoom
to
a lot.
come up to Donkey Mill.
I'm on Zoom a lot. This is the first before and after I've ever experienced on Zoom.
Nuila. And maybe I'll see you all tomorrow. And thank you so much for your insights. It really was inspiring. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us, and thank you for sharing the beginning and end of your your hair doings. Yes.
Multitasking.
Yes, no, for turning your video on. Right on. Elle, do you have anything closing words?
No, all the thank yous. Thank you. I was going to sing, but I sang with myself earlier. But maybe I will. Maybe I'll sing one part. Yeah. Cham chapa chamamayom chiqui squi cham. 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 Yam yapa yani yamayom yani yamayom. Cham chapa chamamayom chiqui squi cham. That's it, folks.
I love you. Yeah, I love your voice too. I've always been a fan. So
yeah,
I wish I could sing that good.
Hey,
oh my gosh.
don't take up
So-
smoking and drinking. It won't help you. All right,
Yeah.
everyone.
Okay, aloha,
Right,
everyone.
aloha, everyone.
Okay,
Extremely
aloha,
grateful.
my
Lena,
good
love you.
night.
Bye.
Love you
Good
all.
night,
Thank you so
everybody.
much.